Welcome to Project Versus, where we treat real life like a game. So what do I mean by that? Well, a game usually has some goals, and the first goal of this game is to acquire money. Why do we need to acquire money? It's to get equipment. And why do we need more equipment? It's to create the best setup possible so we can achieve the best results possible. In Project Versus, we start off with a budget of £20. And if you play tennis for any length of time, you know that £20 isn't going to go very far. So we've got to acquire money if we want to get better equipment. So how do we acquire money in this game? The first is to play tournaments. So just for playing a tournament or a match play, we get an appearance fee of £5. And in the UK, which is where I'm based, the tournaments are run by an organisation called the LTA, and they have a grading system from grade 6 to grade 1. Grade 1 being where the highest level players play. So starting from grade 6, if we enter a match play there, a win is worth £10. If we move on to grade 5, a win is worth £15, and if we win the whole tournament, it's worth £30 bonus on top of the match winnings. If we move on to grade 4, a match win is worth £20 a win, and if we win the tournament, we get a bonus on top of those wins of £75, and if we move on to grade 3, we get £35 a win and a tournament win bonus of £180. Now I'm going to stop there because the highest level that I've played is grade 3, so if by some miracle I manage to up my level and play a grade 2 at some point, then we'll revisit these rules, but for now I'm going to stick with that. The next way we can acquire money is by selling the items in our inventory, probably on eBay. I would say we could sell it to people in real life, but then unless I get proof of the transaction, I could be accused of cheating. So most likely I'm just going to put it up on eBay and see what happens. Or I could look at the price that the item is selling for at a reputable seller, and I could quick sell it for half that price. So for example, if I find a seller on eBay that's got a decent reputation and is selling a racket for £100, and I've got that same racket that I'm looking to sell, I could quick sell that for £50 and remove it from my inventory and get that money. So hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully with the money that we make, we can buy better equipment that better suits our style of play and achieve the best results possible. So that is the plan, that is the goal. Let's see what happens. I also want to point out that I string for myself, so that's going to save us a lot of money, and I would recommend everyone else do so as well. Back in the day, this was probably over 12 years ago, I actually took a course on stringing, and I would say it's well worth the money. Or even you can just buy a stringing machine and teach yourself on YouTube. So yeah, if there's something you're considering, I would recommend it, and it's going to help us tremendously in this game. So let's move on. In a lot of games, you get to choose a starter weapon at the beginning. In our case, our starter weapon is going to be a tennis racket. And we've got 4 tennis rackets we can choose from. We're going to choose 2, one being our main racket, the other being our backup racket. So to start off with, we're going to have a look at the Head Prestige Mid 2018 version. This one has a head size of 93 square inches. Some may say it's pretty difficult to use because it's very low powered. If we choose it, we're going to find out whether it is or not, but that is the first racket that we could choose. The second racket is also the Head Prestige Mid, but it's the 2019 version. So again, quite similar. If I remember correctly, this one is a little bit stiffer on the stiffness scale, but the vibration frequency might be a bit lower, so that could cancel it out. We'll go more into detail a bit later on. So that is the second racket we could choose from. And the next racket is the Volkl Power Bridge 10 Mid. There is another 93 square inch head. So no one said this game was going to be easy, and it definitely won't be. So that is the third racket we get to choose from. And the final racket that we get to choose from is actually still in its packaging because I've never used it. And this racket, from what I've heard, is the most difficult of the bunch to use. It's the Wilson Pro Staff 85. It's a racket I've always wanted to have a hit with, but never got around to. and there you go. I believe this is the reissue from Tennis Warehouse a couple years ago, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's in amazing condition. It is unstrung, so we'll have to factor that into account if we do choose it. But those are the 4 rackets we get to choose from. Let's go into more detail. The first racket we'll have a more in-depth look at is the Head Prestige Mid, the 2018 version, or it's known as the Graphene Touch Prestige Mid. So I've got the racket recommender tool up here because it does condense all the specifications into one little program, and it's convenient for us. So we have a look at the table here. This is a little bit concerning because with a swing weight of 326, we've got a shot speed of 65.0 miles an hour, which, I mean, if we look at the graph, it's way below average. So straight away, we've got concerns there. The frequency is 145.1 hertz. So it should be on court, it should feel quite precise, and yeah, but that shot speed is a bit concerning. But let's move on to the recommender. I want to look at the width of this racket. So if I get the spin specs up, there we go. The width comes out at 23 centimeters, so on the less than average side, and as expected since it is a 93 square inch head. But yeah, all the specs point to it being pretty difficult to use. The string in this racket is Head Pro 17, which, if I remember correctly, is pretty powerful, but we're going to pull up the specs on that now. And the first bit of data we're going to have a look at is the dwell time at 38.0 milliseconds, which is very long for a dwell time. And while that indicates it's probably going to be more comfortable, it usually comes at the cost of power. So we need to bear that in mind. The deflection is 34.1 millimeters, so very high again. Good for a snapback, which imparts more spin on the ball, but we need to remember that excessive string movement can make the string bed unpredictable. So what good is a whole bunch of spin if that ball is flying 10 foot away from our target? Not much use at all. So we need to make sure that that is under control. The next bit of data we're going to have a look at is the stiffness, and for this string it's 164.6 pounds. So I'd say that's on the lower to mid-range on the stiffness scale, and we could expect more power from a string at this level, but the dwell time again probably going to counteract that. So even though the stiffness is on a lower to mid-range, I don't think we're going to get much free power here. We'll take it out into court if we choose it and test it, but again, that's just one of my concerns. If we move on to the tension loss, we've got the tension loss recorded at 54.9 pounds here, which is shockingly poor. And the energy return is 83.9%, which for a soft polyester is round about average. And lastly, we've got the string to string friction at 0.087, which again is round about average for a polyester. So there we have it. Those are all the stats for the string and the stats for the racket. I think I'm going to go through all the potential strengths that this setup could have, and then we're going to look at some of the potential concerns. There's 2 potential strengths I see this setup having. The first being the comfort, mainly due to the string, Head Pro 17, which is on the lower to mid-range on the stiffness scale, and the dwell time, which is extremely long. So these 2 characteristics alongside each other contribute to the comfort. And the other strength I see the setup having is the precision, mainly from the racket. And if we have a look at the frequency, which is 145.1 hertz, it's round about this number and above that we see the precision of a setup improve and your consistency improve. Of course, that comes at the cost of comfort as you go higher in number, but we've got a string in there already that is focused on comfort, so that shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't be, but we're going to have to take that onto court to make 100% sure. So that's the strengths I see this setup having. The potential weaknesses I've voiced before, but I think there's going to be a lack of power. The racket's certainly not going to supply any power, and it looks like the string isn't going to either. And this is a problem when I come up against players that are very powerful And even if I come up against players who don't possess tremendous power, if I'm against a consistent player and I've got a lack of power and I'm in a neutral rally, at some point I'm going to fall behind in that rally because I'm exerting so much energy to try and keep up. So again, that's a big concern because it's something I've gone through in the past. And the other concern I have with this setup is the small head width. So there's a lack of power and a lack of a spin window, you know, low power and no spin. Straight from the off, we're at a disadvantage and neither is a good thing. So yeah, some concerns there. But that's the first setup we're gonna have a look at. Let's move on to the next one. On to the next racket, which is the Head Prestige Mid 2019 model, also known as the Graphene 360 Plus Prestige Mid. If we have a look at the table, we can see that the shot speed was recorded at roughly about 65.5 miles an hour, which is a big improvement over the previous setup, and it didn't come at a cost of too much of an increase in swing weight. So if we have a look at the number here, the swing weight is recorded at 328, alongside a frequency of 135.4 Hertz. So in theory, the racket should be a bit more comfortable, although it might come at the cost of some precision. Anyway, moving on to the width, we've got that recorded at 22.8 centimeters, which is remarkably low. It's expected for a head size of this small, but 22.8, I mean, any thoughts about hitting heavy spin here are out the window, because that is not a big enough spin window. It's even less than the 2018 version at 23.0 centimeters. So yeah, a little bit of a concern here. But if we move on to the string in this racket, which is the Dunlop Black Widow 16, the 1.31 mil version, I'm going to pull up the data on that and we're going to have a look. Onto the Dunlop Black Widow 16 string, we've got a dwell time of 35.0 milliseconds, which is about mid-range. We've got a deflection of 31.0 millimeters, which for a string at this stiffness rating is very low. And talking about stiffness, we've got a recording of 193.2 pounds. So far, this string looks like it's focused mainly on control. And moving on to the tension loss, that's 38.2%. Moving on to the energy return, that's 87.2%. And finally, the string to string friction is 0.107, which is above average really for a polyester, possibly because this string is shaped and it's very sharp actually. So I can see why the string would have some trouble moving along the crosses. So that's the string. Let's move on to some of the potential strengths and potential concerns we have with the setup. Looking at the data, we can expect this version of the racket to be a little bit more powerful. I've got 65.7 miles an hour recorded here for the 2019 version, as opposed to the previous setup of 65.0 miles an hour. And looking at the string data, we can expect the Black Widow to be a little bit more control orientated than the Headsonic Pro 17. And so those are two strengths of the racket that we can probably utilize when we take it out onto the court. If we move on to the potential concerns I have with this setup, the first is the vibration frequency. And while a low frequency is good for those with arm problems, I'm a little bit worried that the less precision could be a problem, especially as we move into the warmer months, into the summer, and even indoors where it's a little bit more humid and the air is thinner. A lack of precision, it can be a big problem. I've experienced that in the past and I don't want to experience it again in future. So we need to make sure that that is under control. And the final issue I have with the setup is the lower width. So I thought the 2018 version was quite small at 23.0 centimeters, but this is even less at 22.8 centimeters. So any ideas of hitting with heavy spin, probably gonna have to rethink that because it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. But yeah, those are the potential strengths and potential weaknesses I see in this setup. The next setup I wanna look at is the Volkl Power Bridge 10 Mid. So let's get these stats up. got the Volkl Power Bridge 10 mid up here on the graph, and if we have a look at the y-axis, we can see that the shot speed was particularly low. It was 64.3 miles an hour to be exact, and that's even less than the previous two setups, which I thought was quite low as well. So for a swing weight of 332, on average we'd expect a bit more from in terms of power. And while we can class that as a concern, I was thinking maybe we could utilize that to our advantage if we take the ball earlier, as we won't have to worry too much about the ball going long. The big concern there would be maybe getting overpowered and instability, but the static weight of 351 grams, hopefully that can combat that problem. But anyway, I'm getting too much into the strengths here. I just want to run through the specifications first before we do that. So if we move on to the vibration frequency, that came in at 134.7 hertz. And finally, the width was 22.4 centimeters. So again, even lower than the previous two setups. That was the specifications. I want to get into the potential strengths of the setup, and then we'll move on to some concerns I may have. Actually, before we move on, I want to touch on the string in this racket, which is the Yonex Polytour Rev 16L gauge. That's the 1.25 mil version. So if we look at the dwell time first, that's been recorded at 34.8 milliseconds, the lowest of the three setups that we've had a look at so far. The deflection comes out at 32.0 millimeters, and the stiffness was recorded at 193.2 pounds. Looking at those three sets of data, it would seem that the string is more precision based, more control based than anything. Not on the extreme end of the scale, but heading towards that way. But let's move on to the tension loss. That's recorded at 34.4%. The energy return was 87.6%. So for a string such as this, like a medium stiffness polyester, probably a little bit above average. And finally, we've got the string to string friction, which is 0.074. So about average again for the string friction. So that's the string. And let's now move on to the potential strengths I see this setup having and some concerns it may also have. Like I was saying, the lack of power on this setup could be a concern, but I was thinking maybe we could turn that into a strength by taking the ball earlier out on court and not having to worry too much about the ball going long. Of course, when you do that, you run the risk of the racket being a bit more unstable as you're attacking a heavier ball, taking the ball earlier, but the static weight of 351 grams, I'm hoping that that can combat that problem. So that is a potential strength, but I'm going to need to take that out on court and test it to be 100% sure that it is. And some weaknesses or some concerns I have are the lower frequency, which does amount to a lack of precision, although again, at least we'll have a bit of comfort there, which is a good thing if we're going to take the ball early. And the lack of head width, again at 22.4 centimeters, the lowest of the three setups that we've had a look at so far. So again, we're not going to be able to hit with heavy spin from the looks of it. We'll try, but it doesn't look like we will be able to. So again, that is the third setup, and the fourth and final one is the Wilson Pro Staff 85. Let's pull up the stats for that. For the Pro Staff 85, I'm going to pull up the specifications here so we can all have a look. And the first thing that I noticed was the static weight of 362 grams, which for a racket nowadays is extremely heavy. I don't think you'll find many heavier than that in stock form. The swing weight is 323 with a shot speed of 64.9 miles an hour. So for all four setups, we've got quite low shot speeds, and power doesn't look to be a strong suit of any of them. So if we're going to trouble our opponents, we're going to need to find a different way to do so. The frequency was 140.8 hertz, and the width actually wasn't measured on the Racket Recommender tool. I had to do it myself, and that came out at approximately 22.2 centimeters. So unsurprisingly, it was the smallest of the bunch, seeing as it's the 85 square inch head size. That was to be expected. And also want to point out that the racket is unstrung, so if we do choose it, we're going to have to factor that into our budget, and our budget is only £20 already. So yeah, interesting to note. So moving on to the strengths of this racket. I feel one of the strengths of this racket should be its stability. With a static weight of 362 grams out on court, I would expect nothing less than a very stable racket. Otherwise, why are we carrying all that extra weight? And on top of that, I think this racket should be pretty precise and good for players that like to take the ball early with its lower shot speed. So that's the strengths I can think of for this racket. The potential concerns I have, obviously, the smaller head means a smaller width, so I don't think we'll be hitting with heavy spin. And also, this racket comes unstrung, so we have to factor that into the account. If we do choose it, we're going to need to probably blow the entire budget on a string. And I mean, the budget is only £20, so really what does it matter? But that's another concern of mine. So yeah, that is all the setups reviewed. I'm going to make a decision on the 2 rackets I'm going to choose and the 2 rackets I'm going to discard. After reviewing the specifications of all 4 rackets, I've come to the conclusion that we are not going to be overpowering our opponents. We're not going to be outspinning our opponents, and we're not going to be serving them off the court. The rackets are just not set up to do so. And as a result, we're going to have to be a little bit more tactical, use a bit more trickery. And I'm thinking that if we take the ball a bit earlier, come into the net, hopefully on our terms as much as possible, that is the way that we're going to put pressure on our opponents and win most of our points. But if you have any suggestions, just drop them in the comments. At this point, I'm happy to take anything on board because I'm starting from scratch. But that's off the top of my head what I think we can do. And so if that is the strategy that we're going to use, as a result, the first racket I'm going to discard out of the bunch is the Head Prestige Mid, the 2019 version. That is because it recorded the highest shot speed out of all 4 setups at 65.7 miles an hour. It was high by quite a big margin actually, and seeing as that is the case, it won't be as well suited to taking the ball early as the other rackets. So this is the first racket that we've discarded. Onto the first racket that I'm going to choose. The first racket I'm going to put into our inventory is the Volkl PowerBridge 10 Mid. And that is because the shot speed recorded was 64.3 miles an hour. So it's best suited out of all of the rackets to take the ball early and put pressure on our opponents that way. I also feel like the string in this racket, the Yonex Polytour Rev, seen as it's more precision and control based more than anything, that really complements the racket, and it really complements the type of play style that I want to execute out on court. And yeah, pretty interesting racket. So that is going into our inventory as the first racket chosen. And that means that we have to decide between these 2 rackets, the Head Prestige Mid 2018 and the Pro Staff 85. I've had a look at the specifications and stats of both rackets, and they both seem to be able to suit the type of play style I want to execute out on court, and suit it quite well to be fair. I have made a decision though, and it's been really difficult. Had the Pro Staff 85 been strung, I probably would have chosen it, but I have in the end gone with the Prestige Mid 2018 with the Head Sonic Pro 17 already strung in the racket. I'm a little bit gutted. I did want to use it. In fact, in future, I definitely will be taking this out onto court, seeing how it plays, possibly reviewing it, and having a look at the data recorded out on court with it. But yeah, really cool racket. One day I will use it. It just won't be anytime too soon. but hopefully in the near future. So that's the two rackets that I've chosen: the Head Prestige Mid 2018 and the Volkl Power Bridge 10 Mid. So them two are going into the inventory, and we're going to take them out onto court, test them, try and get used to them, try and get used to the type of play style I want to execute out on court, and then we'll make some decisions regarding the equipment from there. Let's do it. I also want to point out that we're starting off with a 3 racket Wilson bag, which stores a total of 10 items in our inventory, and that means that we can have a maximum of 3 rackets at the moment, alongside 7 accessories. The accessories could be the dampeners, overgrips, replacement grips, also lead tape, anything along that line. And if we wanted more slots in our inventory, some more spaces in our inventory, we'd have to buy a bigger bag. So how do we buy a bigger bag? We need a bigger budget, and that means we need to start getting match wins, some tournament wins, if we'd like to do so. Right, the first thing I'm going to add to our inventory is going to be a couple of dampeners. We've got a £20 budget, so we're not going to go too extravagant, not like we can even do so if we wanted to. But yeah, I'm on eBay right now. I'm going to click on that set of dampeners. It looks like in total, this is going to be about £7.98. Is that correct? Yeah, £7.98. I'll take that. And so we've got a pair of Wilson W dampeners to add to our inventory, and yeah, we'll test them out on court. And our inventory is looking like this. We've got the Head Prestige Mid 2018, we've got the Volkl Power Bridge 10 Mid, and alongside that we've got a couple of Wilson W dampeners that we can take out onto the court. So I've got a practice match coming up soon. I'm going to use the Prestige Mid first, test it out and see if we can execute the play style that we're trying to out on court. Hopefully we can, but if not, we'll have a bunch of feedback that we can reflect on and see if any changes need to be made. And then the next time out on court, we'll take the Power Bridge 10 Mid and see how that performs. So yeah, that's it for the first episode of Project Versus. Before we end the video, I just want to quickly recap the inventory. So first things first, we've got a Wilson 3 racket bag. We've got the Head Prestige Mid 2018. We've got the Volkl Power Bridge 10 Mid, and we've got the new Wilson dampeners that we bought in this episode as well. So that's 3 slots taken up out of a total of 10. So we can buy more items, we have that option, and I'm hoping that we can improve the budget, get some match wins at some future tournaments coming up soon, so we can do exactly that. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, it might be worth checking out our other content and our future videos that are coming out soon. I'm going to try and do one of these videos a week, try and fit it around my work and tennis schedule. So if it does interest you, stay tuned for it. I'll keep you all updated with how I'm getting on in the tournaments. So thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you all in future. Take care.